Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Alan Helmick. Alan Helmick, born in 1946 and raised in Colorado, developed a passion for sports, especially baseball, from an early age. After completing his education, he married his teacher, Sharon. Together, they raised a family, welcoming 3 daughters and a son. Alan became a successful businessman, starting a real estate company and then expanding into retail and the automotive industry, which helped his family thrive. Sharon was a devoted homemaker, taking care of the family. Their seemingly perfect marriage lasted for 30 happy years until tragedy struck in January 2003, when Sharon suddenly died of a heart attack. This loss was the deepest shock of Alan's life. He struggled with grief and depression for a long time. Even 2 years later, in 2005, the pain of her death still affected him. To cope, Alan focused on supporting his children and began taking ballroom dance classes, pursuing the dream that Sharon had wanted to share with him just before her death. During the classes in Grand Junction, Alan met Miriam Giles, a 48-year-old dance teacher who had recently moved to Colorado. Miriam had also suffered a great loss. Her daughter had died of an overdose in 2000, which was ruled an accident. Unable to bear the pain, Miriam's husband took his own life while she slept next to him. Hearing her story deeply affected Alan, as he could empathize with her pain, and their relationship blossomed into a romance. After a few weeks of getting to know each other, Miriam moved into Alan's home. They lived together for a few years before getting married in 2006 and started looking for a new place to live. Miriam, a horse enthusiast, convinced Alan to buy a large plot of land with a stable. They eventually found a location that was ideal for Alan, as it allowed him to run his business from an office closer than before. He showed his love for Miriam by showering her with gifts. From the outside, Alan and his wife appeared to be a happily married couple. However, Alan's daughter was concerned about the pace at which their relationship was progressing. Despite this worry, both Alan and Miriam seemed genuinely happy. On the day of the dance competition, Miriam felt unwell. While Alan was busy processing documents and signing papers, she frequently went to the bathroom. Eventually, she walked out to the parking lot where Alan was waiting in his car. Miriam wanted to get some things from the trunk. After opening the trunk and searching for a while, she felt unwell again and hurriedly went back inside. Meanwhile, Alan continued to wait in the car. Suddenly, he noticed smoke coming from the back of the car. At first, he thought it was just exhaust smoke and turned off the engine. However, the smoke became thicker and blacker. Realizing something was wrong, Alan got out of the car and saw a fire in the trunk. He quickly ran inside to get a fire extinguisher. On the way, he met Miriam, who was using a container to get water from the bathroom to put out the fire. The fire department was called and quickly arrived to extinguish the flames. When Alan checked the trunk, he found a burnt rope soaked in gasoline. This raised suspicions, indicating that the fire was intentionally set and not due to a car malfunction. The fire department interviewed witnesses and assessed the scene, concluding that only Miriam could have caused the fire. However, Alan firmly believes that this is impossible, but he could not ignore the possibility that an intruder had quietly approached the car. He refused to believe that his beloved wife would try to harm him, let alone kill him. He dismissed the incident as an accident, although he expressed some doubts. The event was quickly forgotten, and although there was still uncertainty after the fire, the couple's life returned to normal. Unfortunately, during this time, Alan fell ill. He spent most of May in bed, but by June, he was starting to feel a little better. Although he was diagnosed with hypertension, he began to adopt a more active lifestyle. Alan loved life and looked forward to the opportunity to return to the field when he regained his health. After a long illness, he seemed to be recovering. However, he did not answer missed calls. This continued until June 2008, when Alan's daughter attempted to contact her stepmother, Miriam. She was also unable to reach him, so she left a voicemail mentioning her plans to visit her father. Unfortunately, her efforts went ignored. On the evening of June 6, she continued to try to contact her father, noting that she had not been able to reach him for over a week. She called her stepmother back, but there was no answer. In the voicemail, she asked her stepmother to inform her father that she wanted to see him and was concerned about his well-being. Despite living nearby, all of her attempts to contact him went unanswered, making it unclear why she did not go to the farm to check on him in person. At approximately 8 a.m. on June 10, 2008, Miriam left the house to go to the local Walmart. After shopping, she contacted her horse trainer. At approximately 9 a.m., Miriam called her husband, Alan, and left a voicemail saying that she loved him and planned to pick up groceries before meeting him at a nearby Chinese restaurant at 10 a.m. Alan did not respond to her message. Miriam tried to call him back but could not reach him and asked him to call her. By 11 a.m., Miriam was at the Chinese restaurant waiting for Alan. After about 15 minutes, she called him a third time, feeling increasingly anxious and upset that he did not answer. She decided to go home with her groceries. As she entered the laundry room from the garage by her usual route, she was surprised to see an overturned trash can. When she looked around the corner, she saw Alan's legs sticking out. Miriam saw her husband lying motionless on the floor, which frightened her. She dropped her belongings, began to cry, and immediately called the police. She told them that she had returned home from shopping and found her husband dead in the living room. Although she was initially certain that Alan was dead, she followed the operator's instructions to perform CPR. However, she felt it was in vain because he was unresponsive. A patrol car arrived at the Miriam family home. The police found Alan lying on the floor. The officer noted that Alan was cold to the touch and had no pulse. There was blood nearby, and the officer observed several open cabinet drawers and a trash can that had been knocked over. A .25 caliber shell casing was also found. When his wife Miriam was taken away from the scene for questioning and photographs, the police found it odd that she was completely clean, despite her claim that she had attempted CPR on her husband as requested. When questioned, Miriam admitted that she had washed her hands after administering first aid. However, the kitchen sink was found to be completely clean and dry, leading the police to believe that she had lied. They suspected that she had not actually tried to help her husband and had only pretended to do so during the phone call. In addition, her calm and even cold demeanor only added to the police's suspicions. Miriam, who has now been taken to the police station for further questioning, recounted the events of that tragic day from the beginning. She confirmed that she had woken up early, made coffee, and talked to her husband on the terrace. They discussed their plans for the day. After the conversation, she took a shower and made the final adjustments to her shopping list before going out to buy household items. It was a normal day, and she had called her horse trainer and, following his advice, bought carrots for the animals. When she first tried to call her husband, he did not answer, which was unusual for him. After the third call, she became alarmed and slightly angry. When she returned home, she found her husband lying on the floor. Confused as to what had happened, she immediately called the police. Miriam mentioned that Alan's son, Alan Jr., was at their house and had left for work around 6 a.m. The conversation then turned to Alan Jr., who had been living in their house for several weeks. He would come home after his shift. Alan Jr. had a separate room and used a different entrance to his room. He occupied part of the first floor and tended to live in isolation. At the time of the incident, Miriam had not seen Alan Jr. for about 4 days. She suspected that he was not getting along with Alan, but she did not provide any strong evidence to support this belief. Just before the incident, his son, Alan Jr., had come to visit him from Alaska. They had some paperwork to take care of. Miriam mentioned that they were experiencing problems. However, at the last minute, things took an unexpected turn. Alan had banned his son from coming and warned Miriam to call the police if Alan Jr. showed up at their house. Miriam said that Alan Jr. was in a dispute over the ownership of the stove and that his father had spoken out against him. This situation contributed to the deterioration of the relationship between father and son, and they did not see each other. She acknowledged the possibility that Alan Jr. might have threatened her father, but she was unsure of the specifics. It seemed that Miriam was trying to blame Alan Jr. The police discovered a particularly strange detail in Miriam's story. She could not even remember the addresses or ages of her husband's children, which was very unusual. Alan Jr.'s alibi was later verified, clearing him of suspicion. Other family members claimed there had been no conflict between Alan and his son, making it clear that Miriam's story was a lie. The police began to follow her movements around the city on the day of the incident. They found it strange that she made some unusual trips, especially when she went across town just to buy a bag of carrots, which was clearly not enough for their horses. They pointed out that the vegetables could easily have been purchased at Walmart. This behavior led the police to suspect that she might be trying to create an alibi to explain her long absence from home. Miriam became the prime suspect. In response to the detectives' questions, she said that they had a prenuptial agreement stating that all property acquired before the marriage would go to his children. She hinted that Alan might have been the victim of a robbery. Miriam observed that some shelves had been pulled out and found her husband's wallet left in the kitchen. Normally, the wallet contained several $100s in cash and several credit cards, but it was now missing. Their house was filled with valuables, but they never locked their doors. Miriam claimed that they never used locks or keys. Miriam stated that her husband had no enemies and that their neighbors were decent people. However, she also claimed that she was not involved in her husband's romantic affairs, so she could not provide details about any potential rivals Alan might have encountered. During questioning, Miriam revealed that Alan owned a gun collection. She also mentioned that Alan had struggled with health issues. She noted that he had quit smoking about a year before the incident due to high blood pressure and that his health had declined since then. Furthermore, he had been taking antidepressants to cope with emotional difficulties stemming from the death of his first wife. Miriam insisted that Alan had no enemies. However, she mentioned a minor dispute that occurred a few weeks before the incident with a contractor who was working on their property. Alan had asked for a handwritten invoice and then delayed payment for several weeks, but the debt was eventually settled. The police inquired whether there was any insurance policy on her husband. Miriam was unsure, but mentioned that Alan owed investors about $400,000 for various projects. This raised suspicions, as she had previously stated that she was unaware of her husband's financial problems. Unexpectedly, Miriam asked the police if they suspected her of being guilty, to which they responded that they had some doubts about her story. In response, she produced a large stack of receipts from various locations in the city where she had made purchases on the day of the murder, as if to demonstrate that she had meticulously collected evidence to support her alibi. After questioning, Miriam's clothing from the night of the murder was collected and tested for gunpowder residue. She was then released. During the autopsy, the medical examiner discovered a gunshot wound to the back of Alan's head. No gunpowder residue was found on his skin. Alan died instantly from the wound, falling to the ground with bruising on his head, arms, and body. There were no defensive wounds, suggesting that he had been attacked by surprise. Toxicology revealed the presence of caffeine and nicotine, but no alcohol, illegal drugs, or prescription medications were detected. It was clear that this was a homicide. An expert determined that Alan had died several hours before the police arrived at the house, around 8 to 9 a.m. His wife left the house around that time, suggesting that she may have been involved in the crime, but there were no traces of blood or gunpowder on her clothes or hands. However, traces of gunpowder were found at the scene, suggesting that Miriam may have changed clothes and cleaned up. The police accessed Alan's cell phone. Earlier that morning, his daughter had called him to discuss some documents and a meeting to sign them. There were also calls from unknown numbers, possibly creditors who had contacted him after hearing about the tragedy. In addition, the phone had received many calls from friends and family. To gather more information, the police interviewed the housekeeper, who had known the Allen family for many years. The housekeeper had cleaned the house and had met Allen before his first wife died. She recalled that she had last been to their home on June 9, 2008, just one day before the murder. She confirmed that the door was usually unlocked, allowing her to enter and begin cleaning as usual. However, she noticed that Allen was acting unusually. He was normally very talkative, but that day he ignored her presence and did not even greet her. He seemed very nervous and did not make eye contact when he sat down at the table. Shortly after, a strange man arrived, leading her to believe that there was a problem in the couple's relationship. Unfortunately, she was unable to provide any further useful information. The police decided to look into Miriam's background and discovered some interesting information. After the tragic deaths of her daughter and husband, she faced legal troubles that forced her to sell her assets to settle lawsuits. When the police spoke to a family member, they learned that there were indeed financial problems, largely due to Miriam's extravagant spending habits. Allen was a successful businessman who provided generously for his children, but the purchase of a horse stable and a dance studio, along with the high cost of maintaining the horses, had left them financially devastated. The situation became even more suspicious when, on the same day his car caught fire, Miriam discovered that he had sold his business to pay off debts and had just received the money before they set off. Interestingly, Miriam had excused herself to go to the bathroom just before the fire broke out. It seemed that she had lost interest in her husband because of their financial troubles and decided to take his money and stay away from him. In addition, none of Allen's relatives were able to contact him in his final days. Allen's daughters felt that Miriam was trying to prevent them from reaching out to their father. The more the police spoke to Allen's relatives, the more inconsistencies and falsehoods they discovered in Miriam's testimony. At the time, the police believed that Miriam had a financial motive. However, Miriam claimed that she did not benefit from her husband's death due to their prenuptial agreement. According to the agreement, all of Allen's assets would be divided among the children, but the house they bought during their marriage was considered community property. This meant that Miriam could claim half of it if her husband died, which was a significant amount of money. Many witnesses believed that Allen's wife was the only person capable of killing him. Some suspected that his sudden decline in health shortly before his death was related to an attempted poisoning. These suspicions were partly supported by the fact that his symptoms were consistent with those of poisoning. However, an autopsy found no toxins in his system. It is possible that the toxins had been processed by his body during his long illness. Additionally, another daughter of Allen, who had been living with her father and stepmother for some time, observed Miriam using Allen's mobile phone without permission. Allen's daughter believed that Miriam had disconnected the phone, preventing Allen from contacting his family. This behavior became apparent during the time when Allen's relatives were unable to reach him. The police investigated the deaths of Miriam's daughter and her ex-husband, Jack Giles, and found them to be highly suspicious. The daughter died of a drug overdose, but it is unclear how she obtained the fatal dose. She had a close relationship with her father, but was estranged from her mother, which contributed to Jack's depression. He died 2 years later under unusual circumstances. He had been shot in the right side of the head, although he was left-handed. During this time, Miriam was the sole beneficiary of life insurance policies for both her daughter and Jack, leading the family to suspect a connection between their deaths. Miriam quickly received and spent the insurance money, but 6 months later, a court ordered her to give half of Jack's insurance money to his child from a previous relationship. After Jack's death, Miriam left Florida for Colorado, where she married Alan Hemlick. A disturbing development arose when it was revealed that she had a history of fraud, including attempts to cash counterfeit checks and being implicated in several burglaries. When police investigated her background, they discovered a long history of legal troubles in various states, where she had used multiple false identities to engage in illegal activities. Although she claimed that she would inherit nothing but the house if Alan died, police discovered a $250,000 life insurance policy in his name. Furthermore, shortly before Alan was murdered, Miriam attempted to increase the coverage to $2 million. However, when she tried to claim the money after Alan's death, she was informed that she could not do so because he had been late with his payments earlier in the year. The payment issue arose because Miriam had restricted Alan's use of his cell phone, causing him to miss payment reminders. 2 weeks after the murder, Miriam's best friend reported some disturbing experiences. Miriam called, sounding frightened, and explained that someone had broken into her home while she was at work. A friend offered her a place to stay. The next day, they decided to go to Alan's house together. There, they discovered a yellow envelope with a postcard hidden under the carpet. The postcard, written in a scrawl with many errors, ominously stated that Alan was the next victim, not the last, in Miriam's life. Feeling threatened, Miriam quickly contacted her lawyer. Although she feared for her life, she expressed concern that the letter writer might return to her home. She also mentioned seeing strange cars parked nearby and hearing unusual noises the night before the murder. Police examined the note and found it was written on a rare type of postcard, which led them to the place of purchase. Within days, they had surveillance footage confirming that Miriam had bought the postcard and sent it to herself. The store clerk even remembered her. The investigation revealed that Miriam had harmed her own parents. First, she robbed her father and even burned down his house. Then she went to her mother's house, who lived in another state, and robbed her before fleeing to Mississippi. Miriam had also stolen from Alan several times, leading to suspicious transactions on his account. A bank employee noticed these irregularities and tried to inform Alan, but he was unaware of the situation because his wife had hidden her phone. It was discovered that more than $140 had been withdrawn from Alan's account, although he had not made any significant purchases. This was unusual, as all of his associates stated that Alan often planned large purchases in advance and discussed them with his accountant. The day before his death, Alan appeared very upset, perhaps because he had learned about the unauthorized withdrawals, which could have caused him considerable stress. Could this situation have led to a murder? When the police decided to arrest Miriam for the murder, they discovered that she had left Colorado and was staying at her son's house in Florida. Miriam had taken her belongings from Alan's house with her. She quickly registered on a dating website, stating that she was looking for a wealthy man who earned at least $500,000 a year to meet her needs. During the investigation, police found several searches on Alan's computer related to horse euthanasia. There were numerous searches for medical drugs used for this purpose, including dosages of sleeping pills and poisons, along with information about their dangers. This was concerning because Alan had nothing to do with horses. It was his wife who cared for them. It appeared that she was the one searching for this information, raising suspicions that Alan may have been the victim of poisoning. Police suspicions were confirmed when it was learned that Miriam's family had no sick horses that needed euthanasia. On November 8, Miriam Giles was arrested and charged with first-degree murder. The prosecution had a substantial amount of evidence for the case, but relied heavily on circumstantial evidence. It is believed that Miriam had been trying to kill her husband for a long time. She was also suspected of attempting to blow up Alan's car while he was inside it. This incident may have prompted the police to begin their investigation. At the time, the film No Country for Old Men was popular, featuring a villain who blows up a car. The prosecution theorized that Miriam had been inspired by the film and attempted to kill Alan in a similar manner. A DVD of the film was actually found in their home. On December 12, 2008, bail was set at $2 million, and Miriam remained in jail. It was discovered that she had used several forged documents, including a passport and a driver's license. The prosecutor insisted that her entire life had been based on deception. Many of her statements during interviews were presented to the jury, along with numerous instances of her lying and her extensive criminal record that contributed to Alan's death. However, the prosecution relied heavily on circumstantial evidence to support the murder charge. The defense argued that there was no concrete evidence that Miriam used a gun to shoot her husband, and that the murder weapon was never found. After witnessing the defense's desperate attempts to prove Miriam's innocence, the jury ultimately found her guilty. Miriam Giles was convicted of first-degree murder and arson of her father's house, in addition to multiple counts of document forgery. After a brief deliberation, the court sentenced Miriam to 108 years in prison. The prosecutor's office then attempted to charge her with the murder of her first husband, Jack, as she was the prime suspect. However, the evidence gathered during the investigation was deemed insufficient, and no charges were filed. Geraldine Kriegel and Patrick Kriegel lived in Ireland. In 2006, they celebrated their 20th wedding anniversary. They had a wonderful relationship. Even though they faced infertility, they did not lose hope. Both had successful careers, financial stability, and they wanted to adopt. They were waiting for confirmation of their documents. Finally, Geraldine and Patrick received news that a 2-year-old girl from Russia is available for adoption. Her name was Anastasia. She was born on February 18, 2004, in Novokuznetsk, Russia. Immediately after birth, she was taken to an orphanage because her biological mother was unable to provide for her. Anastasia spent her entire childhood mostly alone, as the caregivers primarily focused on more demanding children. This lack of attention resulted in her having difficulty expressing emotions. Geraldine and Patrick was overjoyed when they learned about Anastasia. They quickly developed a close relationship with her. On August 10, 2006, they brought her home, and this date became a family holiday. From now on, her name is Anastasia Anna Kriegel, affectionately called Anna. The day when laughter filled their home was the day that Geraldine and Patrick truly became parents. They wanted Anna to remember her culture, so they bought her a matryoshka doll. The once quiet life of Geraldine and Patrick turned into a fun adventure. Anna was daddy's angel and mommy's princess. They tried to diversify their lives as much as possible. They went ice skating and planned excursions every summer. They vacationed in Patrick's hometown of Annecy, France, where they had a house, and Anna made several friends. She always looked forward to this trip, enjoyed France, and even studied French. However, there were obstacles in Anna's life. She struggled with learning English, and her mother helped her because she wanted Anna to be able to communicate with her peers. Anna also faced challenges in forming close relationships and expressing her emotions. Time spent without adequate care in the orphanage led her to be uncomfortable with physical affection. Nonetheless, Geraldine and Patrick were able to help Anna overcome this emotional emptiness through their unconditional love, support. A nurturing environment, combined with educational activities, healthy eating, and sports, laid a solid foundation for Anna's future. Unfortunately, the girl also faced health concerns. During a routine examination, the doctor discovered a tumor in her right ear, which caused hearing loss, as well as partial blindness in her right eye. Despite these difficulties, Anna grew into an energetic and joyful girl. However, her hearing and vision problems made studying difficult, leading to poor academic performance in elementary school. She attended consultations with specialists until the 3rd grade in order to keep up with her peers. In her everyday life, Anna took her challenges to heart. This affected her self-esteem and diminished her desire to live in this world. One day, while walking home and enjoying the fresh air with music playing through her favorite headphones, she encountered 4 boys who blocked her path. They made fun of her, one even pinched her. Anna ran home in tears and told her mother. Geraldine and Patrick took this incident seriously and filed a complaint against the boys, informing the police about the boy who had touched Anna. However, he was let off with just a warning. Consequently, the parents decided to accompany Anna to school and pick her up every day themselves, but this led to more ridicule. She vented her feelings on social media, seeking acceptance from her peers. This situation deeply affected Geraldine. It was painful for her to see how unhappy her daughter was. Soon, Anna began to inflict physical harm on herself to drown out the emotional pain. The parents realized the severity of the situation and worried that their child might take more drastic actions. Geraldine's only wish was for her daughter to be happy. Finally, Anna began to show signs of improvement thanks to personal therapy. She made some friends with whom she had sleepovers, went for walks, watched movies, discussed boys. As Anna's high school education was coming to an end, on a sunny day, May 13, 2018, Geraldine wanted to help her daughter prepare for a test. On weekends, they usually did their homework together. Their hard work, that day they decided to take a break. They turned on the TV, made popcorn, and watched a movie while hugging Anna's cousins. Geraldine joined them and ordered pizza. The children played games while the adults sipped wine and enjoyed snacks, filling the house with a joyful atmosphere. May 14, 2018, began as usual. Geraldine got on the train headed to Dublin while Anna went to school. After lunch, she had an appointment with a psychologist. Patrick, who had retired by this time, took the opportunity to sleep a little longer. Classes ended at 4 p.m., and Anna called her mother, but there was no answer because Geraldine was at an important meeting. She wrote a message to her daughter, saying that she would call back soon. When Anna came home, Patrick was relaxing in the garden and heard the doorbell. A young man was standing at the threshold. He was the same age as Anna. Patrick was not expecting guests, and Anna was surprised to see the guy. Patrick had never seen him before. Anna's joy was obvious. She whispered something to the guy, grabbed her favorite sweater, and told her father that she would be back soon. Patrick reminded her that she needed to study, which she had forgotten because of the sudden guest. He saw them leave for the park. Patrick was not immediately worried since the park was only a 20-minute walk from their home. At 5:10 p.m., Geraldine returned home and tried to call Anna, but she did not answer. Not wanting to overreact, she thought Anna would be home soon. However, Anna did not return. Patrick told his wife that Anna had gone to the park with some guy. This was strange considering Anna's difficulties with communication. Geraldine immediately texted Anna, asking her to come home. When there was still no answer, it alarmed the parents, especially considering Anna's previous issues with bullying and her health problems. Concerned, Geraldine decided to go to the park, but there were no traces of Anna there. Geraldine and Patrick began searching the streets in their car, trying to find any signs of Anna. Their fear deepened when they realized they knew nothing about the young man Anna had been with. By their own efforts proved unsuccessful, by 9 p.m., they reported Anna's disappearance to the police, emphasizing that her lack of response to calls and messages was out of character for her. They also informing the police about the unknown guy. The police quickly tracked down the young man, whose name was Boy B. His family was surprised by the police's arrival. Investigators asked Boy B to describe Anna's whereabouts, and he said that they had walked together until 5:40 p.m. before he went home. After that, the police began searching for Anna. They combed the area and reviewed footage from surveillance cameras. Patrick and Geraldine provided photographs of Anna, including one in which she was wearing the black sweatshirt she had worn in that evening. Supporters gathered around Geraldine and Patrick, while the police carefully studied video recordings showing Boy B and Anna in the park around 5 p.m. At 5:14 p.m., they left the park through a different exit, but after that, Anna seemed to have vanished without a trace. Her disappearance became a mystery. Progress in the investigation was made when they managed to find a witness who saw Anna and Boybe walking through the park. Video footage captured Boybe walking alone through the park at 5:49 p.m. Under pressure from the police, Boybe admitted that he was with another friend named Boy A. Boy A liked Anna, and Boybe was acting as an intermediary between them. With this new information, investigators intensified their efforts and began broadcasting information about the search for Anna across all social networks, as well as in local newspapers. Simultaneously, they searched for Boy A. His backpack was found. Video footage showed him entering and exiting the park, but he had been absent for a long time. Some opinions suggested that Anna might have run away, but this theory was quickly dismissed. To resolve the mystery of Anna's disappearance, detectives organized a step-by-step recreation of the events that had occurred in the park that day alongside Boy B and Boy A, under their parents' supervision. The interaction between the boys raised the police's suspicions, so they were separated for individual interrogations. Boy B's testimony remained consistent. Boy B began the interview the previous day by repeating what he had told police the previous week, that Boy A had asked him to call Anna's house, in Leixlip, just outside Dublin in County Kildare, and bring her to meet him at St. Catherine's Park, so they could talk. And that he had left Anna with Boy A before going home to do his homework. During the investigation, police reviewed more than 700 hours of CCTV footage from the area around where Anna went missing. The detectives, Daly and Gannon, repeatedly told Boy B that the route he claimed they had taken that day did not match what was recorded by cameras in and around St. Catherine's Park, which is on the Lucan side of Leixlip, on the border between County Kildare and County Dublin. But Boy B stuck to his story, offering various explanations to police about the inconsistencies between the CCTV footage and his account. They said that, on a later occasion, they were attacked by two strange men, resulting in a fight where Boy A hit one of the men on the head. Both men ran away. He then showed the police the injuries they had inflicted, including scratches on his arms and legs and a cut on his face. These men could have been responsible for Anna's disappearance, so the detectives needed their descriptions. The police also seized the boys' belongings to conduct examinations for DNA evidence of the attackers. As the investigation progressed, police brought in specialized search units, including divers and a rescue team, to check nearby bodies of water. In total, 60 people were involved in the search for Anna, including volunteers and the Kriegel family. Anna's disappearance became a sensational news story. Her photo in a black sweatshirt became a symbol of her search. Near the park, there is Glenwood House, a derelict farmhouse designed by James Gondon in the 19th century, located in a town of Coldblow, west of Lucan. One of the eyewitnesses reported seeing young people and police entering it, so the police went there to investigate. The house was 2 stories, sat on 42 acres of land. It was in ruins, with the roofs and walls having collapsed. It is unclear why the police had not checked there earlier. They conducted a thorough examination of both the house itself and the fields behind it. The search began in the park, where they meticulously searched every bush before gradually moving toward the abandoned house. The police checked the utility room while the volunteers searched the main building. It was very dark inside as there was no light in the room. The policeman was taken aback by the pungent smell filling the room. Once his eyes adjusted to the darkness, he realized that in front of him lay a naked female body, next to which lay clothes and a broken telephone. On the floor, there were traces of blood beside a brick and a large branch. Judging by the clothing, it was the body of Anna. There were multiple wounds on her body, and her neck was wrapped in duct tape. Her hand lay as if she had been trying to tear off the duct tape herself. It was evident that she had fought valiantly for her life. Her naked body, wearing only socks, lay among broken bottles and garbage. Many questions arose about how this could have happened, who was responsible for this crime. Why was Anna in this building? This incident irrevocably changed the lives of Geraldine and Patrick. The death of their long-awaited and beloved daughter was an indescribable tragedy for them. The whole city learned the details of what happened, and most people were in shock. Glenwood House, located near the park where children had played peacefully, was now the scene of a terrible crime. An autopsy revealed that Anna had sustained about a dozen wounds all over her body, including bruises and cuts, primarily on her head, face, and neck. The cause of death was attributed to blunt force trauma to the head, as well as asphyxiation, indicating that Anna had been abused. Based on the traces of semen found, it remains unclear whether she was conscious during the assault. Her death occurred between 5:25 and 5:54 p.m., just a few minutes after she left the park. At the entrance to the building, she was struck with a heavy stick that had nails sticking out of it before being hit with a brick. Blood on the walls and evidence suggested that the attacker dragged her body to the window, most likely to limit visibility for anyone outside. After collecting all the evidence, the police arrested two individuals. Boy B and Boy A, who were last seen with Anna, were suspected of the murder. In Boy A's backpack, a mask with the image of a zombie was found with traces of Anna's blood, along with gloves, shin guards, and knee pads. The semen found matched Boy A's DNA. Anna's blood was also located on his shoes and clothes. His mother believed he had been attacked and then washed his clothing. Boy A denied involvement in Anna's death despite the evidence found at the crime scene. No DNA was detected from Boy B, and there was no blood found on his belongings. During interrogation, Boy B admitted that he had seen Anna enter the abandoned house with Boy A but was unaware of his friend's intentions. Boy B wanted to approach the house but was frightened by screams at the entrance. He witnessed Boy A tearing off Anna's clothes and then turned to Boy B, his face reflecting the danger that prompted Boy B to remain silent. It later emerged that Boy A had shared his vile plans with Boy B. Both boys were released on bail pending a trial date, which angered local residents not only because they feared for their safety but also because the identities of the criminals had not been made public. Both boys came from respectable and successful families and had no criminal histories or psychological problems, which surprised the residents of the city. The hearing of their case took place on April 29, 2019. It was a closed hearing, attended by the parents of the defendants, as well as Geraldine and Patrick, who found the proceedings difficult but promised to defend their daughter to the end. The prosecutor stated that Boy B had lured Anna out of the house under the pretense of facilitating a meeting with Boy A, whom she liked, while Boy A took her to the abandoned house and abused her. The jury trial took place on June 18. Boy A was sentenced to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after 12 years. Boy B was also found guilty in Anna's death, receiving a 15-year sentence with the possibility of parole after 8 years, despite the lack of material evidence. According to the law, their identities must remain confidential. If released, they would be given new identification. However, the harshest sentence was borne by Anna's parents, as Geraldine stated that life without Anna had ceased to hold meaning. Patrick died on June 19, 2022, haunted by the guilt of allowing his daughter to go with a stranger that day. The tragic loss of Anna Kriegel left an indelible mark on her family and the community of Leixlip. Geraldine and Patrick, who had poured their love, hope into building a joyful life for their adopted daughter, were shattered by her brutal murder. The conviction of Boy A and Boy B, though a step toward justice, could not fill the void left by Anna's absence. Anna's memory lives on in the hearts of those who loved her. A year spent in the open air can ruin many things, but what if a person's body was in this condition? Was the person an accidental victim of circumstance, or was he brutally murdered? And how can the criminal be found if the detectives only have an incomplete skeleton at their disposal? Yellow House Canyon is a vast natural area of rugged terrain located near the town of Lubbock, Texas, USA. This area used to be Indian territory, but in 1993, it gained a different kind of fame. During that summer, 2 local residents went hunting in the game-rich canyon. However, at the very beginning of their trip, something suspicious caught their attention. They came across a bone, completely devoid of flesh. From several meters away, it did not appear to be part of an animal. As they got closer, they realized it was a human skull and reported it to law enforcement. That same day, forensic experts arrived in the canyon. In addition to the skull, other items were found nearby, scraps of clothing and a woman's shoe. The remains were scattered, To piece everything together and find the missing parts, investigators sifted the soil around the area. This process allowed them to find several more fragments of the body and smaller bones, as well as some strands of hair. Unfortunately, the skeleton was far from complete. It was likely that predatory animals had dragged the bones around the area. Despite the efforts of law enforcement officers, they were unable to recover all the parts. All of this evidence was taken to the lab for examination. The scant fragments of human remains, according to the forensic expert, had been exposed to the elements for at least a year. To obtain more information, the assistance of a forensic anthropologist was needed. Among the remains, the lower part of the spine, the sacrum, was found. This discovery allowed the experts to determine that the remains belonged to a woman. The shape of the skull helped establish that the deceased was a person of European descent. The cranial sutures had not yet closed, indicating the approximate age of the deceased, which the specialist estimated to be a young woman between 18 and 24 years old. More intriguing were the marks found on some bones. These were notches and depressions of a pointed shape, characteristic of injuries inflicted by a knife. The marks suggested that the girl had died as a result of murder. One cut was located in the shoulder blade area, with 6 cuts in the vertebrae region. In total, forensic scientists counted about 12 to 30 separate injuries. There were likely more, but this could only be confirmed after all the bones were found. Thanks to all this data, a diagram of the victim was created, which depicted the skeleton of the deceased with all her injuries noted. According to the forensic expert, the criminal had attacked from behind. Such injuries could not have been inflicted by the victim herself, leaving no room for doubt. The unknown girl was considered a victim of murder. The notches on the bones indicated that the attack had been very brutal, reflecting a furious assault on this young girl. More information was needed to identify who the victim was and to initiate a full investigation. During the time that the remains had been in the canyon, several disappearances had occurred. It became necessary to turn to the public in the hope of obtaining tips regarding the deceased, after which the search for the perpetrator began. A press conference was held, prompting calls to the city police department. Meanwhile, dental records were checked, and data was compared with records of 64 girls who had disappeared across the United States over the past years, but none matched the description. They then decided to enlist forensic expert and artist Karen Taylor, the only one capable of attempting to recreate the face of the deceased from the skull. Such specialists are usually called upon last, as there is a high probability of error and inaccuracy in the resulting image. Many factors can introduce distortion, but there was no alternative. Karen Taylor was contacted because she had developed a unique method known as two-dimensional facial reconstruction. Unlike other methods, which often strayed into the realm of art and the artist's interpretation, this method relied on scientific data. Karen took into account the structural features of each race, making her approach more accurate than others. Using rubber markers, she measured the thickness of the facial tissues by placing them directly on the skull of the deceased. This method ensured a highly accurate reconstruction based on the thickness indicated by the markers. She established starting points for creating the facial image. This detailed process required many hours of concentrated effort. After positioning the markers, she took numerous photographs from various angles and placed translucent paper over the bones to help outline the approximate facial contours. Next, Karen identified common facial features based on her anatomical knowledge, including that the average human eyeball measures about 25 millimeters in diameter. However, there is limited information available for facial reconstruction since soft tissues like the ears and nose completely decompose. The deceased had only a few tiny skin fragments around her nose, so the minimal information relied on the state of her bones. Karen observed a slight asymmetry at the base of the nasal opening, suggesting a possible injury from the victim's past. Fortunately, during a search in the canyon, a lock of hair was discovered, helping the forensic artist identify the exact color. The deceased had fair hair with a yellow-red tint, providing a useful clue. Given the statistics on eye colors associated with this hair type, Karen chose a likely eye color for the victim. After creating a rough sketch, it was quickly released to the media and shared across Texas. Unfortunately, there was a significant margin of error, so they depended heavily on the artist's skill. Investigators hoped that Karen's depiction would help someone recognize the missing person. A year had passed since the girl went missing, and details about her disappearance might have faded from people's memories. She wasn't listed as missing, possibly because she had no family or friends to report her absence. It would be an understatement to say there was little hope. Now that the police had published a photo of the supposed victim, they could only wait and hope for a positive outcome. A few days went by, and it was an ordinary morning for Beverly Tillery. While browsing through the newspaper before heading to work, she came across a photo of an unknown young woman whose remains had been discovered in Yellowhouse Canyon. Beverly noticed that the woman's features closely resembled those of her 17-year-old daughter, Belinda Tillery, who had gone missing over a year ago. Concerned, Beverly reported the similarity to the police. Dental records were checked, confirming that the remains belonged to Belinda. At the time of her disappearance, Belinda had been working as a dancer at a local nightclub run by people involved in organized crime and a biker gang. Beverly had always disapproved of her daughter working at that club, especially since she was only 17. However, Belinda was a rebellious teenager. She had dropped out of school and often ignored advice from others. The club offered good pay, making it hard for her to turn down the opportunity. Without an education, she felt she wouldn't be able to earn that kind of money anywhere else. Upon discovering the name of the bar where the victim had worked, the detectives quickly went to investigate. They doubted anyone at the bar would be willing to talk. The bartender, upon seeing a photo of the girl, stated that the club would not cooperate. The detectives felt that the staff were withholding information. Everyone insisted they didn't know anyone named Belinda, as if no dancers by that name had worked there. Ultimately, the detectives left without any leads. However, Belinda's family insisted that she had danced there, even the night before she disappeared. When Belinda worked at the club, her older brother typically drove her to work and picked her up whenever he could. On that fateful night, he drove her home after his shift but didn't notice anything unusual. According to him, the last time he spoke with Belinda, she mentioned feeling unwell, so she went to her room to sleep after arriving home. He had consumed a few drinks that evening and swiftly went to bed, passing out and not hearing anything. The next morning, he intended to check on his sister, but he found no one in her room. No one had noticed when she left. The belongings she always took with her were gone. Belinda had departed with her purse, driver's license, and all her essentials. Initially, no one was concerned, assuming she was with friends. However, as time passed and she did not return, the situation became increasingly alarming. Her mother was the most worried. She knew the reason behind her daughter's illness. Belinda had often felt unwell during the previous month, and a few weeks before her disappearance, her family had taken her to the doctor. It turned out that she was pregnant. When they went to the police with a missing persons report, the local authorities reluctantly began the search, but they eventually stopped altogether. It was decided that Belinda had simply run away to start a better life far from her hometown. However, her relatives did not believe this, despite the fact that Belinda had previously disobeyed and led a rather dissolute lifestyle. The news of her pregnancy had changed her significantly. She did not consider having an abortion or running away. Instead, she decided it was time to change her life for the better to become a good mother. The shocking news prompted the young dancer to leave the club, return to school to finish her studies, obtain a certificate, and find a decent job. During this time, Belinda seriously began to discuss further education and a career. She took the matter much more seriously now. She reluctantly talked about who could be the child's father. However, according to her mother, it could only be one person, Troy Armstrong, who always seemed suspicious to her. Her relatives did not approve of her communicating with him. His mother was especially against it, particularly because he was a member of the same gang that owned the club. Additionally, Troy was 10 years older than Belinda, yet he still couldn't seem to settle down. Beverly knew that he was notorious for numerous petty crimes, which resulted in him frequently ending up in prison for short stints. During the intervals between his criminal activities, he lived with friends or in his car. Troy struggled with banned substance addiction and was known for his quick temper. Beverly was convinced that he was capable of much more violent acts than robbery and fighting. From the very beginning, The Tillery family did not like him very much, but Beverly did not want to ruin her relationship with Belinda by criticizing him. She simply accepted her daughter's choice and hoped that Belinda would come to her senses. No one suspected that things could escalate to the point of pregnancy. Beverly believed that this young man could never become a normal father for the child, and he would likely be opposed to the pregnancy. There was no one to suspect of the murder except Troy. As soon as the detectives learned about him, they planned to raid his home. But tracking him down was not easy. Troy was essentially homeless, living wherever he could, though many people knew about him. Thanks to local residents, it was discovered that Troy had not lived in the city for at least several months. As far as his friends knew, the main suspect had headed toward Roswell, New Mexico. The search for him there took 2 whole days, but it was unsuccessful. However, during this time, the police managed to contact his former lover. She turned out to be Angela Allen. She herself had not seen Troy or Belinda for quite some time. Angela reluctantly cooperated with the investigation, describing her relationship with Troy as toxic. She truly loved him, and he claimed to feel the same, but the longer they were together, the more violent and unstable he became. It escalated to the point where he physically abused her on several occasions. Angela was well aware of Belinda's situation, which seemed quite suspicious. She first learned about Belinda when a stranger called her boyfriend, "She is Belinda." Belinda could not get through, but left a message on the answering machine stating she was pregnant and that Troy wanted to talk about it. Shortly before Troy and Angela had disappeared, they had run into Belinda at a local bar where she worked. Troy insisted that Belinda should have an abortion, as he was not prepared to be a father. This led to a serious conflict between them. According to Angela, Belinda refused to terminate her pregnancy, stating that she was determined to raise the child on her own without outside help. She didn't care who the father was or how he would treat the child. This infuriated Troy, but he managed to restrain himself and did not start a fight. After these events, Angela decided to take advantage of the situation and end her relationship with him. Despite their breakup, she still maintained some of her ex-boyfriend's belongings, thinking that he might return for them. She feared that throwing them away might anger Troy. Eventually, she turned everything over to the police. Among these items was a large knife. When this bladed weapon was handed over to the forensic experts who were working with the remains, there was an immediate assumption that it could have been the murder weapon. The appropriate analyses were carried out, but the results were disappointing. The knife could have been the murder weapon, but the tests were highly inaccurate. The longer the bones were exposed to the open air, the more the remaining damage was subject to deformation and erosion due to the elements. A year later, it was impossible to say with 100% certainty whether this object was the murder weapon. The detectives who spoke with Angela had the feeling that she was not telling them everything. The investigators decided to speak with her again, and they were correct. In fact, they had to meet with her 3 times. Each time, Angela provided a little more information, often under pressure and through subterfuge. During the 3rd meeting, she explained why she was being evasive. She simply feared for her life and insisted that cooperating with the police could anger Troy, leading him to seek revenge. Nevertheless, she managed to reveal increasingly valuable information. The main suspect, Troy, was still missing, and the detectives were desperate for leads. Angela mentioned that she had kept in touch with him after their breakup, and that shortly before Belinda disappeared, she had met him again. Troy had said he was going to invite a dancer from the club to camp in the canyon, where the body was later found. On his way back from the canyon, he stopped by Angela's to pick up some things. She immediately noticed that he was acting suspiciously. There was blood on his hands and a fairly large wound. When asked about it, he claimed that he accidentally cut himself while camping. However, Angela no longer believed him. She asked several leading questions, but Troy avoided direct answers. Despite this, it became obvious that something alarming had happened. Shortly after, Belinda really did disappear. Yet, Angela still could not believe that Belinda had become a murder victim. Based on the description, it seemed Troy had killed her with a knife. As often happens, the attacker himself had been injured. When the detectives finally informed Angela that Belinda's body had been found in that very canyon, she had no doubts. Troy had killed the pregnant woman that night after all. Angela was horrified to realize what a dangerous man she had gotten involved with in the past. Even worse was the fact that the killer was still at large, and no one knew where to find him. Sufficient circumstantial evidence had accumulated against him, leading the police to issue an arrest warrant for 27-year-old Troy Armstrong. Angela was interviewed again, hoping she hadn't left out any crucial information that could help find the suspect. But now, she insisted that she had told the police everything she knew. She had no idea where her ex-boyfriend was, but she mentioned his best friend, who worked for a transportation company in California. Angela offered to help by having them talk to this man. The detectives believed her, as it was evident that she wanted the criminal to be apprehended quickly. She said she could not feel safe as long as he was free, especially considering that it was thanks to her that the police had received a substantial amount of circumstantial evidence. After this visit, detectives contacted the transportation company where Troy's friend worked. Fortunately, the management was aware of his whereabouts. The man worked as a truck driver, and each of the company's trucks was equipped with a tracking system, allowing them to pinpoint his location quite accurately. Suspecting that he might be helping Troy evade capture, the transport company management cooperated with the authorities to track the truck driver in real time. During the search, he was moving through Nebraska. To intercept the vehicle, they notified the highway patrol along his route, setting up a checkpoint. Within 3 hours, Troy's friend was stopped. It was believed that he might have dropped off Troy somewhere along the way. However, to the detectives' great surprise, Troy was found in the sleeper compartment of the truck. There was no concrete evidence that the driver had helped him hide from the police, and he denied any wrongdoing. Nonetheless, the main objective was to capture Troy, who was immediately arrested and charged with first-degree murder before being extradited to Texas. The accused insisted that he had no involvement in Belinda's death. Following his arrest in New Mexico, police searched his personal belongings and found a suspicious key, which turned out to belong to a storage unit he had rented in Mexico. When the police located and opened the equipment, they discovered several personal items belonging to Belinda, some of which were identified by her family. Troy was never able to convincingly explain why he kept these items or how he had obtained them, which only added to the circumstantial evidence against him. Among the items found in the storage room were a driver's license and accessories that Belinda loved and always carried in her bag. They should have been with her after she left work at the nightclub. Troy probably hid all of these to make it more difficult to identify the body if it were found. According to prosecutors, Troy had a grudge against Belinda because she refused to get rid of the baby. After she revealed her pregnancy, his girlfriend Angela decided to break up with him, which drove him into a rage. One night in July 1992, when Belinda saw her family for the last time, Troy borrowed camping gear from a friend. Later that night, after the rest of the Tillery family had fallen asleep, he showed up and invited her to go camping in Yellow House Canyon. He claimed that he had broken up with Angela, wanted to discuss the pregnancy and their future relationship. It is clear that he managed to deceive the naive underage girl who was carrying his child. Not suspecting that it was a trap, she went on this short trip, hoping that they would have a complete family. During the hearing, the jury was presented with the version of events in which Troy and Belinda were left alone in the mountains. Instead of discussing their life together, Troy again insisted on terminating the pregnancy, which Belinda refused. They quarreled. In a fit of rage, he took a knife and attacked her. She tried to escape but was stabbed more than 10 times in the back, after which she fell to the ground. Belinda was likely still alive when Troy left her to die from blood loss. Upon learning that her ex-boyfriend had finally been arrested and would face punishment, Angela agreed to testify against him in court. Her testimony proved to be pivotal. Angela became bolder and confessed that during their next meeting, Troy admitted to stabbing Belinda in the mountains and leaving her there. Angela had remained silent until then because she feared that if she reported it to the police, she would become his next victim. As she did not know the approximate location of the body, Angela was afraid the authorities wouldn't find it before Troy could take revenge. The trial lasted 4 days, after which the jury took only 2 hours to find Troy Armstrong guilty of first-degree murder. The jury believed that he deserved a much harsher sentence than was legally permissible. In fact, his actions had essentially sentenced two individuals, a woman and her unborn child. Unfortunately, at that time, the state did not have a law making the murder of a fetus a crime. The judge decided to sentence the criminal to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. In December 1996, he was incarcerated. In 1997, his lawyer filed an appeal, but it was rejected by the court. Troy Armstrong was reportedly serving his sentence at the Gatesville Correctional Facility in Texas. During this time, the law changed, offering him a chance at release. In 2021, he became eligible for parole. However, the commission decided to keep him behind bars, where he remains to this day.